Ms. Wu Shichun, Ms. Hong Nong, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start by thanking the Institute of China-American Studies for inviting me to this conference. It is my great pleasure to join your discussions about China-U.S. relationship. Last Friday, General Mattis, Secretary of Defense at the Naval War College commencement, described three major challenges for U.S. as urgency, power, political will, epitomized by DPRK, Russia, and China, respectively. While I cannot agree with his view that China attempts to replicate an authoritarian model in the world, I take General Mattis' referral to political will in China-U.S. relationship is very relevant. That's the crux for how wrong our two countries at this moment look at each other, especially the way U.S. looks at China, at least by some people. So, what's the political will of China? With the principle of reciprocity, I take out the 200 years of Chinese history to talk about the issue with my American friends. From 1840, the year of the Opium War, to 1949, when the People's Republic was founded, that's about the first 100 years, full of hunger, chaos, foreign invasion, civil wars, a time of misery for China. Then the second 100 years, from 1949, we spent the first 30 years for past funding, and a cultural revolution broke out in this period. No substantial economic progress was made until 1979, when we started reform and open up process. The last 40 years is the time for China to rise up and integrate it with the global economy. Now we are the second largest economy in the world. From now on to 2050, another 30 years or so, is the deciding time for China-U.S. relationship. How to judge the political will of China will surely lead American politicians to make different choices. I must tell my American friends, the political will for China to deal with the rest of the world, and especially U.S., in the next few decades, is based on the past trajectory of the nation, at least the 170 years history since 1840, if not 1,000 or 2,000 years. That is, a sincere and a pure wish to have peace, stability, harmony, economic prosperity, decent life for every human creature, and open to the world. This political will is not from the instinct of any politicians, not from the craziness of any populism. It is from the accumulation of years and years of hard experience by the Chinese people. It is from the strong desire to have a normal, simple life without conflicts and wars. It is from the loss of millions of lives for safeguarding the nation from being enslaved. It is from the happy face when the farmer gets a thick pile of cash by his hard working with his two hands that he never imagined before. It is from the surprise to see someone with big nose and blue eyes from the other side of the Pacific. And this guy is much richer and does a better job than us, and we have to learn from him. It is from hours and hours of production lines where those young girl workers using or overusing their eyesight to put those tiny chips on the silicon board in order to gain a marginal profit in the whole value chain of a smartphone. It is from the close interaction between our two countries. $550 billion US of trade, 5 million people visiting every year, more than 300,000 Chinese students studying in the U.S., and all the benefits brought to our two countries. It is also from the fact that China still faces huge development agenda, more than 20 million people to be lifted from the poverty line, regional imbalance between the East and the West, low standard social safety net, and unskilled governance. Our political will is determined by our internal practice, our knowledge about the world, and also determined by the DNA of Chinese nation. So our intention is clear. We are working hard to realize the Chinese dream. We want to work very closely with great nations like the U.S. We believe the Chinese dream should and can converge rather than confront with the American dream. Its whole idea is fully embodied in the conclusion of the 19th Party's Congress held late last year. But the bad news is that some movers and shakers in Washington, D.C. are taking the perception that China is a rivalry. These people are showing more suspicion about China, arguing that the U.S. policy of engagement with China has failed, unable to realize the goal of reshaping China. The national security strategy released at the end of last year is a clear move. With this perception, nothing looks right. Even Confucius Institutes for Teaching Mandarin can be taken as a form of a covert influence, and every Chinese student looks like James Bond. What worries me most is that being unfriendly to China seems becoming a new political correctness. Those who understand China's intention well choose to be silent. Then, what can we do? Ignoring is unwise. Frustration doesn't help. Let's do three things. First, be true. The sincerity from the Chinese side to be a constructive partner with the U.S. is there. Witch hunters will not believe it, no matter how you explain you are well attended. That doesn't matter. See the action. We made efforts for the Korean nuclear issue, and UN Security Council was able to pass 10 resolutions. We fully implemented them. Being an important and consistent participant in the endeavor to address the nuclear issue on the Korean Peninsula, China is the important party of the cooperation for both the U.S. and DPRK. We welcome the June 12th summit and will support the process in real terms. Some people initially believe that China is out on this issue and later doubt that China is stirring up trouble. Now they conclude that China is the biggest winner. China's position in facilitating peace talks has been consistent. Our initiative of double suspension and dual-track approach serves the shared interest of all related parties. China is willing to continue playing its positive and constructive role and work together with all related parties, including the U.S. and DPRK, to move forward the process of political solution of the issue on the peninsula. Second, be patient. It takes time to change people's mind. It may not be 1 or 2 years. It can be 5 or 10 years. Let's wait, but do something at the same time. The trade issue is hanging for some time, and I think it will be on the table for a certain period. Let's talk about it, no matter on trade deficit or structural issues. President Xi announced a package of new liberalization measures at Boao, and those will be done. But we appeal our American interlocutors to be credible and consistent. When you agree, you mean it. And putting tariff on certain billion Chinese products as a pressure will achieve nowhere. We've been growing up under pressure, but we never bend our principles under pressure. Every country has domestic issues and difficult to address. When Chinese economy has a problem, we try to find solutions by ourselves, not blaming others. In addition, there are things that can be done in the context of international governance. Dr. Paulson of Peterson Institute rightly put it recently that there are new issues not covered by WTO rules. Then we work on new rules. Third, be candid. There are many issues between us that are negotiable, but some are not. The issue of Taiwan is the one, because for China, it is not a diplomatic issue, but a sovereignty issue. The 3 joint communiques signed between China and the U.S. is the fundamental documents for our diplomatic relations. The gist of it is the One China policy. This gives us a secured framework. Within this framework, many good things could happen, including the exchanges between U.S. and Taiwan. But the risk we see today is that some people want to break this framework. The Taiwan Travel Act is a very wrong move, and some people in the Capitol Hill want to enhance clauses on Taiwan in this year's NDAA. My assessment is that such breakthroughs will finally make the possible impossible. And my real worry is that any misjudgment on Taiwan issue will lead to unwanted consequences, because no politician in China have any room of compromise on the issue of Taiwan if such framework is broken out. This is also not in U.S. interest. And finally, I need to add one point. Be optimistic. We do have friends in this country who understand the stake and gravity of China-U.S. relationship and want to enhance the relationship, though they may be a bit quiet now. They are in every sector: executive, think tanks, media, business, the Senate, and Congress. And the number is not a small one. And we see a much brighter picture at the sub-national level. Every time I visit different states, I can feel the strong enthusiasm from the local to develop closer ties between their states and China. There's something quite different from that within the Beltway. China and the U.S. are 2 great nations. During the Second World War, our militaries fought arm by arm against fascism. We had excellent cooperation on issues like climate change and infectious disease in recent years. As the permanent members of UN Security Council and 2 largest economy, we have the responsibility to work together tackling security and development issues in the world. As we have a full house of think tanks and friends from the academic community, I'm looking forward to a feast of wisdom and a clash of thoughts. I hope friends across the society in China and the U.S. can work together to deepen understanding and cooperation between our 2 countries and build a bridge of friendship above turbulent waters and contribute new vision and strength to the future of development of China-U.S. relations. And thank you for your attention. I'd like to take a couple of questions.
Thank you, Minister Li, for your very excellent remark. And then you've been very honest, frank, and open, sharing with us how the Chinese government proceeded China relations. And your points well taken, that we need to be patient and taking time to get people to understand each other. And your last point is very encouraging. We have to be optimistic. So now, as Minister Li said, we're ready to take a couple of questions. Okay, I saw the first hand from Gordon.
Thank you very much, Minister Li, and I appreciate it. I'm Gordon Holden from the China Institute at the University of Alberta. I appreciate it very much you situated the broader context of U.S. China relations. But turning back to the immediate, yesterday there were comments by President Trump that China may be facing potentially a quadrupling of the tariffs up to $200 billion. This is beginning to eat into a significant amount of Chinese exports to the United States. Will China maintain its previous dollar-for-dollar response, as in was the case with the first tranche of U.S. tariff? Will there be, in effect, a proportionate Chinese response if President Trump proceeds with his latest threat? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think the Chinese roadmap for opening up and reform is pretty clearly stipulated by the president in Boao. I think this is a determined trajectory for China to pursue, and we are going to pursue this very seriously. The trade talks has been going on for some time. We had 2 rounds of the delegations, very high-level delegations in town, in D.C. Also, Secretary Mnuchin and Wilbur Ross also were in Beijing. I think these talks are serious, and they make progress. We like to continue these talks in a very professional way. I'm crossing my fingers, but also feel happy about the progress for that. But this administration is pretty unique. We seek that the president has his Twitter every day. He has an announcement from time to time. So we take the statement of yesterday very seriously, but at the same time, we have to be very calm and stick to the original negotiations. I think it will come back. I think everybody will come back to the negotiation table. This is the only way for us to address the issue. It's not the simple way to giving a number there and then you have the result tomorrow. It takes, look at the WTO entry for us. It takes so many years. So many nitty-gritties, technicalities for that. This is a professional thing, this is a technical thing, but with political power, political will on it. So that work together for this. The good thing is that President Trump has, he always claimed that with good chemistry and friendship with President Xi, and that's true. I think that's a good basis, political basis for the negotiation on trade. So I'm kind of optimistic about that, and this is something from yesterday. I hope it's tactic. It's not the political decision from the president, from the administration. So I think maybe let's see. Things happen today may change tomorrow. So it's normal. It's a kind of new normal. Yeah.
The gentleman and then this lady. The gentleman first and then.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Steve Winters, independent consultant. One of the points that President Trump and the administration seem to be making is that there are also other countries, I could say Germany, for example, which have, or other countries, which have expressed similar concerns about Chinese economic practices. And I guess there's a call by the administration to have some sort of united front of many countries in pressuring China to change certain of these practices. For instance, particularly Germany, the so-called Mercator Institute for China Studies, very strong representative of studies along those lines. So what do you say to that claim that there are other countries coming to the same conclusions that China has to modify its policies?
Well, this is Chinese history. We did have 3 kingdoms, and they just some kingdoms just get united and separate. It's pretty normal. This is all in all, it will finally get to the interest of the national interest. It's just normal that for Germany and the British, France, Japan, and other countries, they have to see eye to eye on certain issues. Sometimes we see eye to eye with the U.S. against other countries. It's pretty normal. But the thing is that for the bilateral talks, it's important. But at this moment, I think there is a vacuum of multilateral rules for all these issues. So I would take the personal view that for the WTO, at least for the last 10 years, not so much progress on the rulemaking. So we need to work on these multilateral rules to govern all these countries, including U.S., including China, Germany, and others. We do have the G20 and the previous, we have APEC, but not working too well, especially I think the U.S. is losing enthusiasm in it. So we do encourage all the parties to sit down and talk about it bilaterally, but at the same time, let's work on multilateral arrangements for that. So with that a framework, we will not see that one country is closer to the other one, and not so much close to the third party. So let's work on these rules. I think that's gist and the final solution for the issue.
Hi, Jiang Mengjie with Caixin Media. So also about the 200 billion tariffs. So Trump administration said it's because China doesn't want to change its unfair trade practice. So I want to know how would China respond? What causes the escalation from your perspective? And also, do you think are there any fundamental difference between China and the U.S. in thinking about the trade issue, especially about Chinese industrial policy, such as Made in China 2025? Thank you.
Look, all these agreements we reached with U.S. and with others is generally under WTO rules. We try to follow these WTO rules after we enter this organization. I think we sincerely observe these rules. And all these agreements we reach the U.S. is with the U.S. government, not with U.S. NGOs. So for us, we don't understand for this administration doesn't recognize any agreements with the previous administration. That's not a way for international practice. So if you say that there's an unfair practice in China, we follow the rules. If you think that we are breaking the rules, you can sue us in the WTO, you can talk with us bilaterally. So we don't agree with the idea that China is breaking these rules and exercising unfair trade practice. Take the Made in China 2025, that's the strategy, mainly from the think tank. But if you point out that this document is violating WTO rules, just tell us. We correct them. If not, it's just a national strategy. Many countries have this kind of a strategy. So let's talk about the gist of the issue and don't make illusions on this. And we cannot agree with maybe Mr. Lighthizer idea that China is stealing the technology and there's a forced technology transfer in China. And if such a case, we deal with this case. But from the national guidelines, there's no such kind of a stipulation for forced technology transfer. So it's a different issue. You cannot generalize. You cannot generalize issue by saying that China is taking unfair trade practice.
Okay, Dr. Ruiz, and then this lady over there and this gentleman.
Thank you, Minister Stan Weeks, Science Applications International Corporation. Could you elaborate a little bit on your comments on Taiwan? You mentioned a new, I presume it's the draft National Defense Authorization Act, but I'm not sure exactly the provisions you were referring to. Thank you.
On the issue of Taiwan, the basis is 3 communiques we signed between U.S. and China, and the core of it is the One China policy. So if we observe this One China policy, everything is fine. Look at the Taiwan under Ma Ying-jeou for 8 years. We had pretty smooth years, and we had a happy experience for Taiwan's participation in WHA. And there are certain countries that they had the desire to have diplomatic relations with us, but we hold it. So we think we should have a pause for that, and for the conflicts between Taiwan and the mainland. So that's under the one China policy, for observe the principles of the three communiques. But now the issue is that under this Green Party and the Tsai Ing-wen, that she doesn't recognize this 92 consensus and the one China policy. American side argue that the statement by Tsai Ing-wen during her inauguration is neutral. That is a recognition of the policy, one China policy, in a de facto way. We don't think so. So make it clear that it's not a difficult thing. And with that, everything is okay. Everything's okay. I say that the good things could happen between, including the exchange between U.S. and Taiwan. We give a green light. We welcome that exchanges, commercial exchanges, non-official exchanges, social exchanges between U.S. and Taiwan. They're good people. We do have relatives in Taiwan. They're Chinese. We take care of their health. So why for the WHA that we encourage for the technical levels exchange? It's going on. So we not hold anything that will affect the real welfare in Taiwan, for the people in Taiwan. But politically, this one China policy is always there. If you break it, if you don't take it in the framework, everything seems very difficult. So that's our policy. So we encourage our American friends to recognize the importance of a one China policy and follow these rules.
Chia Ching from United Daily News. I have a question about Taiwan too. Well, U.S. government urged the Chinese authority not to ask the U.S. airlines or other countries' airlines to change it's how it writes Taiwan on the website and other apps. And now the Taiwan embassy, David Lee, he now asks Taiwanese people not to take those airlines who changed its name. And it's going to cause inconvenience for the Taiwanese people. And if the goal for the Chinese is to get closer to the Taiwanese people, is it not going to have a negative effect? Thank you.
I think the answer is pretty simple. If you conduct business in a certain country, you observe the laws in this country. It's like the Chinese firms that have to observe the laws here, and our companies get a punishment from the U.S. government if they don't observe the laws. It's the same. So we ask the airlines to observe the laws in China. It's a pretty natural thing. And many companies do that, and I think it's the right choice to make. So we do encourage all the airlines, all the companies, including the U.S. airlines, to follow the suit.
I'm going to give the last question, thank you, and to this gentleman here, and you've been waiting very patiently. You get the last shot.
Thanks very much for impressive speech. I found that in your speech you mentioned more and more communications between the two peoples of the United States and China. You also proposed suggestions on the cooperation between these two countries. So I want to know the role of the think tanks in promoting the cooperation and understandings between the two countries. Thanks.
It's a very relevant question. I think that the problem between our two countries, China and U.S., is one of the cause is the lack of communications at different levels. Of course, at the top level, the two presidents have exchanged calls, and they meet in the past, but that's not enough. I think for the other levels, like the second track, 1.5 track, think tanks will play a very important role because there's misunderstanding. There's a clear misunderstanding between us. So the lack of a communication and talk face-to-face will help to minimize those misunderstandings. So let's do it. And we do encourage to organize the think tanks and get together and talk with each other in a very, very candid way. That what's the real problems for us and how we see each other. So we do encourage the Chinese scholars come here, but at the same time, we do encourage the American scholars and think tanks go to China and look at China with your own eyes and see what is really happening in China, what really the real people think about their country, China, and China-US relations.
Thank you, Minister Li, and please join me in giving a big applause to Mr. Li for sharing. Thank you so very much for sharing a valuable time with us. That's very encouraging. Thank you.